CivilTalk Podcast. I'm your host, Tapacio Althouse. If you're new to the show, this is where we explore civility and social emotional learning with esteemed guests, expert insights, and practical advice to help people navigate the world. Today, I have the incredible honor of speaking with someone who truly embodies the intersection of global leadership, emotional intelligence, and authenticity, Henna Inam. Henna is a former C-suite executive turned transformational coach, global speaker, and the author of two powerful books, Wired for Authenticity and Wired for Disruption. Through her writing and coaching, she helps leaders go beyond surface level success to lead with clarity, presence, and purpose, especially in moments of uncertainty. In her first book, Wired for Authenticity, she introduces 7 practices that help leaders show up more fully, courageously, and adaptively. And in Wired for Disruption, she offers a neuroscience-backed framework for developing agility across 5 dimensions, to not just survive disruption, but to use it as a catalyst for reinvention. Today, we're going to explore how we build that kind of inner resilience, what it means to lead with authenticity in complex environments, and why disruption might be one of our greatest opportunities for transformation, both individually and collectively. And thank you so much for being here. We're grateful to have you here.
Well, thank you, Tapacio. I'm really looking forward to connecting with your audience.
Likewise. So before we get into the heart of your work and your books, I'd love to start with your journey. How did this all begin for you, and what led you down the path of exploring authenticity and leadership?
Yeah, so I had a 20-year career and in various roles with large Fortune 500 companies, and came to the ripe old age of 40 and thought to myself, I should really be happy. I've got a lot of accomplishments under my belt. And it was a bit of a wake-up call, actually, when I was recognized by my company. Each year, our company would give 10 awards among 90,000 people for performance results. And that year, I was one of the 10 people chosen. So it was it was an incredible honor. And I remember catching a flight back from that meeting where my team and I got awarded, back to, at that time, I was living in Mexico City in Mexico, and having that thought at 30,000 miles, 30,000 feet above sea level, and really trying to think through, like, what is it that will make me happy if this isn't really what's making me happy? And so that really set off a very good and fruitful series of questions about, well, who am I and what will really make me happy? Mm-hmm. And so I went off and learned how to meditate and be mindful, because I wanted to explore much more about who I was. And I discovered that there was a big difference between achievement and fulfillment. And so it got me on this journey of really what will be fulfilling for me. And that was the start of the whole question around authenticity.
Yeah. Well, you did a beautiful job of weaving together these moments of what it sounds like sort of self-actualization into the corporate world. How did you start this? Because it seems, you have a lot of experience in leadership and the corporate world. When you were coming into yourself, I guess, authentically into your being, was it a natural ease of fusing the two, or how did you begin that process? Was it with your books? How did that journey begin, fusing the two, those two modes of operating?
Yeah. So I'm kind of smiling, Tapacio, because you talk about it in the past tense as if like it's kind of a done deal. And what I want to just say to everybody is we continue to grow, and I continue to explore my own authenticity. It's an ongoing process of living. And as long as we are living, I think we are, for me, I think it's important that we explore who we are being in this moment of authenticity. That is probably the first piece that comes to mind, is that it's not a a thing that's a one and done. It's kind of, even today, I'm in this process of deepening and figuring out who am I really and what's next for me and what's happening now. So I don't know if that resonates for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So can you talk about your first book, Wired for Authenticity, which
Yeah.
beautifully outlines, I think, 7 practices to help leaders show up more fully?
Yeah, I actually pulled out a dusty copy. Here we go. It's been a few years since I wrote this book.
Here she is.
And I, you know what, at the time that I wrote this book, I remember the moment my coach, I was working with a coach, and I was had just transitioned a couple of years ago, prior to this, into leadership coaching for my corporate career. And I thought, gosh, leadership coaches need to have books because that's kind of, sets them apart. And my coach, who is incredibly wise, said, well, if you wanted to write a book, what would you write about? And it had me completely stumped for a little bit. So I took a while to like, oh, what would I write about? And I kind of dug deep and I thought, well, the thing that I struggle with most is what I want to write about because I want to learn about it. And that was kind of the genesis of this book, Wired for Authenticity. It was a thing that I wanted to really explore for myself, first and foremost, and then obviously for leaders, because obviously there is our corporate cultures ask us to be certain ways and suppress certain parts of ourselves. And so, how do we walk that line between being true to ourselves and also being successful and productive in a workplace? And so, the definition of authentic leadership that I came up with as I did this exploration is it's the fullest expression of me for the benefit of we.
Right. I love that. Yeah. It's a very all-encompassing statement. You describe feel all your feelings as a core part of authenticity, which,
Mm.
as you're saying, I think is often overlooked in traditional leadership training. If you could speak to our leaders who are listening now, how can they begin to build that kind of emotional fluency, especially in environments that prize logic over emotion, and sort of stepping into a confident position where feeling all your feelings doesn't feel like it's distracting?
Yes, of course. Of course. I get that. I was kind of a champion at suppressing all my feelings. That was how I was raised as a kid. I was often what was valued in the household that I grew up in and the culture I grew up in was very much about performance, and feelings can be a distraction to performance. So I kind of grew up in a family culture that was a lot like corporate America, which is probably why I was really successful in corporate America. And so I get it, right? I get that when we're in the middle of a meeting and something really angers us in that meeting, we don't want to show up and blow up because we want to maintain connection, especially if that anger is at our boss or people that are working with us as our peers or employees, right? So um, at that point in time, when I say feel all your feelings, what I mean is not about expressing all your feelings. It's about not suppressing those feelings. So feelings like anger, for instance, which particularly for women are incredibly hard to culturally and from a gender perspective, not accepted for women to be angry. So the key is to not either suppress it nor to express it in non-opportune times, but to actually explore it.
Mm-hmm.
So feel all your feelings means, oh, I'm noticing in the moment that I have some anger coming up. And I can make a note of it in the middle of a meeting. And I can say, I want to go back to this and really explore what is this anger? What is the message of this anger? What is this anger wanting me to stand up for in this moment? And how do I know, like, who is it really at? So there's, all these feelings are pretty complex. And so the ability to really reflect and explore, ideally with somebody who's a coach, would be amazing. And it allows you to get deeper knowledge of what's actually wanting, your body is wanting to happen. And so it's a source of incredible truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. How can, with that being said, how can leaders help establish a sort of community, I guess, vibe, you could say, in the team room where this is being facilitated? So, having employees feel a certain way, what sort of tip or trick can you give to our leaders to help their team members feel like they have a space to not only feel these feelings, but express it in an authentic way?
Yeah, so I think this requires a lot of inner work. I'll say that first. First and foremost, on the part of the leader, to do their own work, to really explore how they can be with anger, or how they can be with, any emotion, sadness that comes up, or shame. Because when we get into the habit of suppressing emotions, what ends up happening, it actually takes a lot of energy in our body to keep suppressing emotion. And that actually takes away from our own life force energy. It takes away from joy, it takes away from spontaneity, and it makes us very tired and exhausted. And so I would say the first work, before you, as a leader, before you even bring this topic up in a team meeting, is to make sure that we, each of us, have had the opportunity to work through and learn how to be with our own anger, learn how to be with our own disappointment, sadness, shame, fear of failure. And that requires a lot of inner work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like this one line in your book: presence is what authenticity feels like to others. And I think that's also presence is a really good segue into creating a safe space for leaders and their team members. I know at CivilTalk, in our meetings, our, founder is really good at sort of opening up our conversation with, how is everyone doing? Something as simple as that, and going around and just giving less than 2 minutes recap of how our week is going, like, how's your girlfriend, how's your wife, how's your husband. And that has always created a space where authenticity can thrive, because you don't, and I've felt that, and I really liked this idea of presence in these meetings, which predominantly might be stifled because it's your boss, it's your job, but I feel like small things like that have really helped me, and I think a lot of my team members, be okay with having feelings like, I'm feeling sick, and having your higher up be like, are you okay, do you need to take the day off? Something as simple as compassionate presence has made a huge difference in my job and jobs that I've experienced in the past. And also, it's been something that hasn't been in jobs that I've had in the past. And I have felt stifled, and it really is a detriment to how you work. So I really love this idea of leaders, and you mentioned it in your book, this word presence, leaders being present with the people that they're with. First and foremost, to draw out what your mission is, and being able to work together in a fluid way, and in a way that's human.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved that during the pandemic, when we had all of a sudden everybody went virtual, one of the key practices that many leaders were doing exactly what your boss does, right? Is to go around the room and say, what's happening now? How are you, what's up for you? How are you feeling? because so many people were going through so much during the pandemic. And I think since then, we've sort of lost that practice. And I would love it that more and more leaders can bring that back, because as much as we were suffering during the pandemic, the disruption that we all live with in today's world, whether that is, many people having fears around AI, many people, all the geopolitical conflict that is happening, that if we can just take a minute to check in to say, how are you doing right now?
Mm-hmm.
And include that emotion, whatever that is. I'm feeling a little disjointed because I've got some stressful situation going on, and you hear the person out, and then it's included in the room, and people can, and the person who is feeling worried or disjointed can actually be more present because they've had the ability to express and be accepted for whatever it is that they're going through.
Right. Exactly. It's basically showing that you matter in your team. It's really important to show your coworkers and employees that you and your feelings, all your feelings, do matter, and they have agency in meetings. Because you are at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I would say that, Tapasio, that is absolutely true. And there's also responsibility for the individual whose
Mm-hmm.
feelings matter, right? It's about the individual also being respectful of the team environment
Exactly.
and not making it all about them. That's why authentic leadership is the fullest expression of me. I'm going to be fully expressing what it is that I'm going through in a mindful and aware way, but it's for the benefit of we. It's not just for my benefit.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fine line I think people need to understand too, is sort of reining in some things and understand which feelings you have to be self-responsible for, and which ones can you share with your team, to understand that if my team can help me through this, we can do better together. I think I was reading the other day about just the definition of self-actualization. I was reading about self-actualization, and there is this paragraph saying that self-actualization never happens in a vacuum. You need other people to self-actualize, which I love that concept, in the sense that, self-actualization always, to me, felt like a very individualistic job. But in reality, it really depends on the people you surround yourself with the most to sort of
Absolutely.
bridge those emotions and feelings and bring them out into the world in a way that is responsible and not selfish.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love that idea.
The whole idea of, I completely agree with you around self-actualization. To me, there is no self-actualization without co-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
That if one person cannot, if one person self-actualizes and it has no impact on the community in which they live,
Mm-hmm.
um, because we as mammals, as humans, have mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are empathy. The parts of us that basically enable us to be empathic with
Mm-hmm.
each other, and even monkeys and baboons, and highly evolved mammals, dolphins and whales. They all have this way of being part of community. And so it really, I love that thought that, self-actualization can't be done in a vacuum. And
Mm-hmm.
that ultimately our work is co-actualization, is to come together in community.
Right.
Because leadership is an act of community. Who is a leader without any followers?
Right. A cult leader. I don't know. A false god. I don't know. Yeah, definitely. It's very true. A scary thought. I want to shift into your other amazing book, Wired for Disruption, which
Mm.
coexists really well into what we're talking about. You introduce 5 forms of agility in this book. Can you walk us through what that is and why they matter in today's world?
Yeah, so this is that book. Um, yeah, I wrote it actually literally during the pandemic. The first 4 months of the pandemic, it was sort of like, what did you do on your pandemic vacation? This was my little project. And what I was really focused on is how can I be helpful? How can I be useful during the time when so many people are really suffering as a result of all the change that has been thrust upon us? And so the 5 forms, I started writing about the 5 forms of agility, and what I started discovering is that is kind of a mindset for us to stand in.
Mhm.
And that mindset is that we're actually living in this decade of disruption, and that even post the pandemic,
Mhm.
that disruption is here to stay. And in a way, it's actually a crucible experience for our world, for our planet, for all of humanity, so that we can learn how to thrive
Mhm.
in disruption, how to thrive in change. Because any kind of a high pressure situation, if you think about, coal under pressure becomes diamonds, right? And so, what is it that we under pressure can become is what I wanted to explore, and how to do that. And so, there are 5 forms of agility I spoke about. Neuroemotional agility is the first form, and it's kind of the core of it. And it's our ability to manage our own nervous system, to take it from states of threat, which is what happens anytime there is any kind of unexpected change or disruption. Our system, which is built for survival, essentially goes into threat mode. And how do we take responsibility as individuals, as humans, as cultures, as teams, to go from that place
Mhm.
of threat to places of safety, curiosity, creativity? Because um, disruption requires us to be creative. And yet, if we're stuck in threat mode, we cannot really be very creative. So, the neuroemotional agility is the ability to move ourselves individually as managers and leaders of others to help them move from states of threat to states of safety.
Mhm.
The second form of agility that I talk about is learning agility, and that is the ability to learn, um, to relearn, and to unlearn. And unlearning, of all of those, unlearning is probably the most important, because our brain operates on assumptions and biases. Our brain is very, very survived essentially around the ability to make quick assumptions. So the past basically teaches us something, we make some assumptions about that, and then we project that into the future. Well, if the future is highly disruptive, what we learned from the past isn't really going to help us be successful. And so this is the ability to become present, to say, all right, here's all the old assumptions that I'm making, and I need to unlearn those assumptions and relearn. So that is learning agility. The third is trust agility. And trust agility is all about, how do I rapidly build trust in teams that are always changing? If you think about, the people that we collaborate with inside of our organizations, outside of our organizations, globally, multi-generationally, how do I rapidly build trust in these teams?
Mhm.
And so it's really tools and accelerators that help you do that. And they help us become more agile, because teams that are agile are teams that have trust are 80% more agile than teams that don't. The next form, or the fourth form, is stakeholder agility. And it's about our ability to work across silos. It's our ability to work with people who are inside and outside our organizations. It's the ability to see an entire system. So our system could be customers and suppliers and the communities, in which we operate and the impact of the work that we all do together, as opposed to thinking only about ourselves as leaders. And so that's stakeholder agility. And the final form is growth agility. And it's the ability to grow ourselves and other people that we work with at scale, because we collectively need to figure out how to elevate ourselves for a for a world that is much more disruptive than we have been used to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the common thread I'm hearing from what you're talking about is just this openness to adapt is really important. And I think about that too on my day-to-day, whether it be also with my job, with, just the vastness of how you live from when you're born to when the end strikes. You write that, we're biologically wired to resist change, which we all are privy of. Yet we're also wired for adaptation and being adaptable. What gets in the way of us accessing that adaptability, and how can leaders and team members work together to overcome this inability to adapt?
Yeah. So the most, I would say the biggest block to agility is getting into that threat state that we get into. So because we're wired to survive, right? That's the reason you and I are sitting here having this conversation, is because the human, many, many generations over thousands of years have learned how to survive. And that survival is based on the fact that our brains are constantly searching and actually wired to search for threats to survival. And, in the old prairies, we know we could get eaten by a lion. But now in the hallway of work, it's not our physical bodies that are at threat, but it's little things that are threats to our ego. Some change happens and we perceive a threat. And so the key here in terms of helping us become more agile is actually us. It goes back to the first piece of neuroemotional agility, the ability to be mindful, become mindful, and notice, oh my goodness, my system is currently in threat mode. What's happening? How do I bring psychological safety to myself? Because remember, we have mirror neurons. So if my body is incredibly stressed out as a leader, then I likely will translate that stress into my team. And so for me to take responsibility for my own nervous system being relaxed, being at ease, feeling safe, particularly in the midst of a lot of disruption, that's priority number one. And it's what will help me become more agile, because when I move myself from threat state to safety, then I can be more creative. Then I can actually be more open to listening to other people's points of view, to engaging and connecting with others in a much more empathic way than not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having sort of agency and understanding that your ego exists as a leader, because I think the ego can start to run the ship instead of your creativity. And I think what you're talking about reminds me how important it is for leaders to balance this need for decisiveness with the humility to say, I don't know, or figure this out together. And I think it's really important, from what I'm gathering and from what I'm hearing, is for leaders and people to be able to say, I don't know, but yesterday I did, and I was more decisive yesterday, and today is a day of I don't know, and to be okay with that. And for team members to maybe not even shame their leaders, but to applaud leaders in those moments too, and be like, thank you for that honesty. Let's figure this out together.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact is that in a world that is highly disruptive, we actually can't know. There is a lot that we can't know, and pretending that we know is actually a huge recipe for disaster. And our egos, of course, want to be right, right? That's a bias. That's one
Mhm.
of the brain biases is, we want to be right. And because that makes us feel safe. We want to be in control because that's what makes us feel safe. And so really, you know, having the ability to have your own nervous system be relaxed and feel safe allows you to be able to actually say that because
Yeah.
you're not so threatened. You're not so much in a threat state. And that
Yeah.
requires a lot of inner work, right? That requires a lot of dealing with your own fears, of appearing not leader like,
Mhm.
or your own fears of being an imposter, of which I was recently reading a report like 70% of CEOs have the imposter syndrome. And so if you're trying to protect your reputation or prove your worth, you're less likely to be able to and be willing to say, you know what, this is something that we don't know yet. And
Mhm.
it's unknowable and it's okay because we can figure it out.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the idea of this inner agility, that leadership and leading a team starts from within and
Mhm.
doing, and quote unquote, doing the work.
Mhm.
For people like you, I think the idea, we hear that a lot, doing the work. Are you doing the work? But what does that mean? I know individualistically, for every person that might look different, but
Mm.
as a whole, ubiquitously, what patterns have you seen where doing the work is effective? What does that mean, whether it be a daily practice or a habit that keeps you aligned and present and into a mode of doing that work?
Yeah, I love that question because what does that actually really mean, right? In everyday life, in practical life. I would say if the thing that has worked most for me um, is my practice of mindfulness. So, um, finding either there's now lots of apps that allow you to do that. I have a course on LinkedIn Learning that has been taken by about, I think, 500,000 people. It's called Mindfulness Practices at Work.
Mhm.
And it's mini breaks. You don't have to sit and try to do this, for an hour every day. This is about taking a few minutes between meetings or during lunchtime to really breathe and connect. Connect first with what's happening over here. Like, what is the state that my nervous system is in right now? Oh
Mhm.
gosh, it's a lot more activated than when I started this morning. Let me figure out how to relax my nervous system. What am I noticing? And then as you become much more adept at that, you can do it in real time in meetings. You can notice when that anger is coming up in the meeting and you can self-manage that. And that's a big part of emotional intelligence and neuroemotional agility is being able to notice, not suppress,
Mhm.
and explore and manage
Yeah.
what is happening. So I would say that's probably for me has been the foundation of the work. The
Yeah.
second piece is finding like-minded people who will give you feedback. We have so many blind spots about seeing ourselves clearly. So having colleagues in the workplace, and this is what I recommend to all of my executive coaching clients, is having people that you trust in the workplace who can observe your behavior, things that you don't see yourself, and you go to them and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm working on. Would you be willing to give me some feedback? And most people are delighted to be asked because,
Mhm.
of course, we want to be able to help our friends and colleagues.
Mhm.
Um, so to me, that's another part of doing the work. And then I think if you want to go even deeper, getting yourself a coach. If you have a lot of suppressed emotion, that you sense, if you flare up easily, then finding a therapist who
Yeah.
will help you explore the roots of that
Yeah.
and help you metabolize that emotion so that you're not ending up suppressing it, but instead becoming more. whole in who you are, and more authentic in who you are, and more present for yourself and others.
Yeah, I love that. Showing that. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And hopefully people listening can draw inspiration from the way you uh, do the work. For me, I again, everyone does it differently. Everyone does what works for you, and there's a lot of crossover. Therapy is really great for me recently, and those tend to change over time too,
Absolutely.
which is really fascinating and really ties into what you're talking about with change and being adaptable and agile. Is what works for you over time is going to change, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a man, or in between. Everything's going to change. For me, I got really, really concrete and specific about what my values were. And for me, that was doing the work. And I sat down. It was just, a day where I sat down and had 6 to 7, what are my values? And if things don't align with that, I don't want it in my life. And for me, that was doing the work, because it was so much easier for me to say no to certain things. And I know for a long time, I particularly had difficulty saying no.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people pleasers out there. A lot of women are people pleasers.
Mm.
I have inspiration from my friends, or one friend in particular who was really good at saying no to me. And it could have been something small, like, hey, do you want to come to the farmer's market with me? And she'd just be like, no. And we were really good friends. And I remember just being like taken aback by her. And like, she didn't sprinkle any niceties over it. She didn't explain why. She just said no. And I had so much respect for that. And I kind of was like, I really appreciate that you just set a boundary. You said no, didn't explain why. It wasn't a malicious no by any means. She just didn't want to do it. And I liked that. It just didn't go against her. It went against her value system. And you could feel that in the way she said no. And I really liked that. So for me, if anyone's listening, and if you feel connected to do the same, really writing down and sitting with what your values are helped me sort of do the work and definitively say yes and no to things that would be in alignment with my values. That really helps.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it goes back to also the way that you say no. As you said, it sounds like for her, it was a very grounded no. And
Yeah.
she was really standing her ground.
Yeah.
And we really all deserve to stand our ground.
Yeah. People can hear it too. I think once you do more of that inner work, I don't think you need as much explanation as to why you do certain things. And people question you less. Because you question yourself less.
That's right.
Yeah, I think people can really feel that, and it's an energy, and it's that sort of je ne sais quoi thing that you can't really teach. It's something that you just sort of adapt and evolve into. And I have felt that with leaders, like, for example, the founder of CivilTalk is very much like that. There are other people who I've worked with who are very much like that, and you can just feel it. They have their values in place, and there's a certain respect that comes with that. And it's never these people who I look up to, or other leaders who maybe other people look up to. There's never a sense of malice to it or ego. There is a sense of, I know what's good for me, and this is the ecosystem that I am trying to cultivate. If you want to be in it, come join. If this doesn't work with you, then go to another ecosystem. Like will always attract like, I think. What was the other one? I don't remember. But so another practice that you mentioned is facing the dragon. You mentioned in one of your books, and leaning into discomfort and fear rather than avoiding it. And just wrap up this discussion and lean into your experience. What's a dragon that you've had to face in your own leadership? What did it teach you? And what can you say to leaders about fighting and facing their own dragons?
Yeah. So our dragons are the things that we avoid, right? It could be really hard emotions. Some of us avoid anger as an emotion, or some of us avoid fear as an emotion. So for me, one big dragon that I would say, and we face dragons every day, right? Like, so I also want to kind of say, for me in my life, it just becomes a practice. That's why it's a practice. It's not a one or done thing. For me, the biggest one was deciding to leave my corporate career. So 20 years into my corporate career, I've shared the story of early on in the podcast of, really coming to a realization of, wow, why am I not happy? I just got this huge award and all kinds of good, stock options and all this stuff. What's missing? And when I explored the what's missing, for me, what I realized was fulfillment was what was missing. And that really, eventually, what I realized is the work that really fulfilled me was the work of helping leaders really dig deep for who they are and find a way to connect with their deepest core selves and be able to express that in the workplaces so that our workplaces light up
Right.
with people who are lit up and inspired. And I was finding that I was at work, I was not getting enough time to do that. And so I had to face the dragon of, gosh, do I leave this, fat paycheck as a single mom? And do I really pursue that which is fulfilling, really purposeful work for me? And it brought up a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
It brought up a lot of fear of failure. It brought up, I remember I used to have dreams of being completely lost. It brought up, it brought up a lot of anxiety. And that was the dragon that is kind of one of the bigger dragons that I had to face. But I think every time we face a dragon, we discover new parts of ourselves that are resources, and we discover courage, and we discover people who are out there who will help us along the way, mentors and colleagues and friends. It's a big part of that hero's journey that Joseph Campbell writes about, that it's a big part of, our facing the dragons is kind of the essential work of being human and learning about what we're really made of.
Yeah. That's a big one too. I can relate to that a lot. You're talking about, it's just the unknown. It's uncertainty. Facing the dragon is just the unknown. It's this blank state. And I always think about, there's this quote that I read, I think it was more about relationships, but it applies here. And she was saying the admission fee for accomplishment is uncertainty. Like, this is your admission fee. You're going to have to sit through this. You're going to have to sit through discomfort. And I like thinking about sort of paying the toll, because it reminds me that it's not permanent. This is paying. You're just paying the fee right now. You're paying the fee for a month or two of uncertainty. So after this 2-month or 3-month period, you are rewarded for a lifetime of abundance, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I like thinking of it that way.
Yeah. And I also think like it really is. It's like, I know that a lot of faith practices say that, the greatest treasures that we have are actually inside of us. Mm-hmm. And so to me, you pay the toll of discomfort that you talk about. And I love that you pay the toll, and it's kind of a done deal in that way, because nothing lasts forever, right? Fear or any other emotion doesn't last forever. But then you discover something new. And that's the piece that keeps us going, I think. Like, there's more aliveness, there is more purpose. I think that was, that's kind of what keeps me going in this practice, is is the discovery of a treasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes you're talking about this, and sometimes I think for a lot of leaders and people, that sort of going up a level can be really just as scary as the uncertainty itself.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is you're desiring, whether it be a better job, whether it be a better boss, whether it be whatever, I think the attainment of that and maybe even the responsibility of upholding that when you get it sometimes can be really frightening for people.
Yeah.
And what do you have to say to people like that, where they're not only afraid of that unknown period, but they stay stagnant there, unable to get to that next level because they're afraid of that, the awards and maybe the prestige that might come with that and the responsibility?
So what I would say is our fear about something, that next whatever level is just a thought, right? It's not like, do we actually know what it would be like when we get there, when we're not really there? So it's just it's a concept that we have in our heads. That's why I really love how you've reframed it as a toll. It's like a toll you pay, and then when you actually get there, your experience might be completely different
Mm-hmm.
from what you imagined it to be, right? If you think about anything, even like coming onto this podcast, right? I noticed that there was like some nervousness early on around, oh, I don't know what questions we're going to get into. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, no, we're actually having a great conversation. So I would say the best advice that I could give to those folks is to differentiate between their thoughts or concepts, like their worries, and to label it, oh, that's a thought. That is may or may not come true. And that to start to pay more attention to the actual experience of it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the story that I have in my head, to differentiate between the story and the actual experience of it.
Yeah. I love that. It really grounds you in presence and observation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you do that when you observe things and you're able to, I think that's a meditation practice too.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. Which is why meditation is, for me anyway, mindfulness is so foundational.
Yeah.
Because we start to separate what we think about something to our actual experience of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did well, in my 20s, it was a Vipassana retreat where you sit for a week in silence and you meditate. And that was wild, just because it's what we're talking about right now. What it does for listeners is it trains your brain to not react to things and to observe and to not react. So you feel, and I'm sure your meditation practice is different or the same, where you feel an itch and just observe that itch. And it's one of the most boring things you'll ever do in your life. But the whole concept is to sort of rewire and retrain your brain from what I had gleaned to just not react to these outside forces. And it segues so beautifully into my day-to-day life, where that, a person can be a manifestation of an itch, and you're like, I really want to itch you, but I'm not going to do it.
Yes.
You're just a manifestation of something really uncomfortable as a human, but I am going to resist the urge to scratch. I'm just going to observe, and then you let it pass.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of meditation, or your groundedness, or whatever the work that is that you do, is you understand that the whatever discomfort it is, like what you're talking about right now, it's going to pass. And there's a certain beautiful presence to that you can take into your life, into your team meetings, into your leadership roles, into your job as a professor, whatever it is you do. I think this practice is essential and a really great way to build community and lead.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that you've experienced Vipassana. I had very, very strong and deep experience of Vipassana as well. and
Very
just really got so much out of it.
That's great. Did you do the retreats or do you do it on your own or?
Both.
Okay.
Both retreats and on my own. And you're absolutely right. What you learn is to not react.
Yeah.
And then you just observe something as a sensation. It loses its charge, right? You just observe it. Oh wow, that's an itch. It's an interesting sensation.
Yeah.
Or, oh wow, that's an irritable person. That's a
Yeah.
person that irritates me. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a really interesting sensation that I'm having right now to this person.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely feeling it on a physical level first before you feel it on an emotional level, I think is really integral too. And so having practices, that's why I think that things also, if you're trying to do the work, I play a lot of tennis, and that's also something that I try to do because it's a solo sport, and you're there by yourself with your racket and you're just like in your head the entire time, and you have to be agile and fluid. And there's sports are also really great ways, I think, to stay in tune and help yourself be one in your body so you can be that way outside of the courts or whatever. There's so many ways to do it. So
yeah, absolutely. I think athletes, just the connection with the body is so essential,
right.
because all of our emotion lies in the body, right?
Right.
And so staying connected to our body actually helps us become much more neuroemotionally agile.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important, if anyone is listening and taking away something, is that this, there is a mind-body connection, and the boardroom and the meeting room doesn't have to be where that stops. If you're in a meeting, you're there because you have a common goal, and hopefully you can bridge that goal with your experience of doing the work and what we're talking here today. And so with that being said, our last question: how can people stay connected with you, Henna, and learn more about your work and your books and your leadership programs? If you want to plug in anything here, we'd like to know.
Yeah, they can. I have lots of resources on my website. It's www.transformleaders.tv. And so go check out. There's lots of great blog posts and resources. I have several courses on LinkedIn Learning, one on mindfulness. Another one that's also really popular is called Transformational Leadership, and it'll actually help you help discover what your purpose is and lead with purpose in that way and with inspiration. And I have a couple of books that we've talked about here. And really what I'm doing now is doing more of my inner work. So I'm not doing so much production of materials. I'm actually doing more of that deeper work to see what will surface from that. And so I'm really looking forward to staying connected with everyone. And thank you for the space to reflect with you, Tapasio. It's lovely to connect with you.
Yeah, likewise. I love that, by the way, that you mentioned that. I'm thinking of peaks and plateaus. We don't always have to stay connected and plugged in. It's really important also to take a step away for as much time as possible. So we appreciate you being open about that and understanding that that's important. So thank you for being with us today and for sharing all that. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who can use a little inspiration in their leadership journey. This podcast will be up on our site at civiltalk.com with information about Henna and all of her work and links to all of her books and ways to get in touch with her. And if you're new to Civil Talk, we're more than just a podcast. We offer tools and services to help individuals, teams, and organizations strengthen their emotional intelligence, improve communication, and build cultures rooted in civility and respect. From our digital learning platform and curated emotion tagging tools to our AI-powered Word Talk service, Everything we do at CivilTalk is truly designed to help people connect more deeply and lead with intention. Again, civiltalk.com. Thanks for listening. And remember to stay kind and stay open to what growth might look like next.